Money can buy private jets, armored cars, luxury penthouses, and the best security in the world, but it can't buy common sense. Throughout history, some of the richest and most powerful people on the planet have met shockingly foolish ends, not in dramatic heists or grand conspiracies, but in moments of pure carelessness, ego, or bizarre accidents. In this video, we're counting down 5 moments where the rich met unbelievably stupid endings.
And a rather bizarre death to report this morning of the British man who now owns the Segway company. You may be familiar with the Segway. It sort of looks like an electric scooter. Turns out he was found dead at the bottom of a cliff.
Jimi Heselden wasn't born into luxury. He started out as a coal miner in northern England, the kind of man who worked with his hands, breathed in dust, and built his fortune from the ground up. After losing his job during the mining layoffs of the 1980s, he used his redundancy money to start a small business. That gamble turned into something massive. His invention, the Ezego bastion, a collapsible barrier used to protect soldiers from explosions, was shipped to war zones across the world. Governments bought them by the thousands. By the late 2000s, Heselden wasn't just successful, he was worth hundreds of millions. He was also known as a generous man. He donated millions to charities, supported wounded veterans, and helped build community foundations in his hometown. To many people, he was the perfect rags to riches story. A former miner who became one of the wealthiest men in the United Kingdom. Then, in December 2009, he made a move that put him in the global spotlight. He bought the company behind one of the most recognizable gadgets on the planet, the Segway. That strange, self-balancing scooter had once been hyped as the future of transportation, and now it belonged to him. It was a symbol of innovation, wealth, and success, and for a short time, everything seemed perfect. But just 9 months later, on a quiet morning in September 2010, something went terribly wrong. Heselden was out near his countryside home in West Yorkshire, riding one of the rugged Segway models. It wasn't a publicity stunt or a grand event. It was just a simple ride, the kind of everyday moment no one thinks twice about. He was reportedly walking his dog along a path near a steep drop. Another dog walker approached, and Heselden tried to maneuver the Segway to make space. In that single, ordinary moment, everything changed. As he reversed, the ground behind him disappeared. The Segway rolled backward over the edge of a 30-foot cliff, and Heselden plunged into the river below. The same device he now owned, the same machine that represented his latest business success, had just carried him straight over the edge. Rescuers later found the Segway in the water nearby. The injuries were severe, and the coroner ruled that he died from multiple blunt force injuries to his chest and spine. He was 62 years old. The shock wasn't just about the accident. It was the irony that made headlines around the world. A man worth more than $300 million, a philanthropist, an inventor, and the owner of the Segway company, had died while riding one of his own products. Not in a boardroom, not in a dramatic corporate battle, but in a quiet countryside accident that lasted only seconds. When his estate was settled, more than $340 million was left to his family. It was the fortune he had spent decades building. But the story people remembered wasn't the millions, the charity, or the inventions. It was the image of a wealthy entrepreneur riding a futuristic scooter and vanishing over the edge in a moment no one saw coming. Alfred Loewenstein was one of the wealthiest men in the world, a Belgian financier whose fortune came from daring investments in electricity and synthetic materials at a time when both industries were still in their infancy. By the 1920s, he was a man of immense influence, consulted by heads of state, rubbing shoulders with the elite, and commanding a lifestyle most could only dream of. His wealth was staggering, his success undeniable, yet his end would be as bizarre as it was tragic. A moment so surreal it seemed almost impossible to believe. It was July 4th, 1928, and Loewenstein boarded his private aircraft for a short flight over the English Channel, accompanied by 6 others. The plane, a Fokker trimotor, carried him effortlessly through the sky, and the journey seemed routine. But in those quiet, fleeting minutes, destiny was waiting. Loewenstein reportedly moved to the rear of the plane, intending to use the lavatory. A simple act, a mundane decision. Yet, in the blink of an eye, he vanished. The lavatory was empty. The rear entrance door of the plane was open, flapping violently in the wind. Panic spread among those on board as reality sank in. Alfred Loewenstein, one of the richest men in the world, had fallen out of his own airplane. The flight continued to land, but the mind could not comprehend the scene. How could a man with everything, power, influence, wealth, and intellect, simply disappear into the sky like that? His body was found days later near Boulogne, battered but unmistakably alive when he struck the water. The coroner confirmed the fatal injuries, yet the questions remained. How had it happened? Was it a terrible accident, a moment of absent-mindedness, or something more sinister? Theories swirled. Some whispered of conspiracies among business partners eager for a windfall. Others suggested suicide, or that Loewenstein had been careless, distracted by the pressures of a vast and complicated empire. Some even speculated he had faked his death entirely, vanishing to escape the looming collapse of his ventures. His death sent shockwaves across Europe. Stock markets trembled, companies plummeted, and headlines screamed the impossibility of the event. Loewenstein, a man who had survived the complexities of high finance, the turbulence of business wars, and the scrutiny of the world's most powerful, was undone by a single, silent moment at the back of his plane. He was buried in an unmarked grave, leaving behind a fortune, a mystery, and a story that would fascinate and haunt the world for decades. It's a chilling reminder that no amount of wealth or power can shield anyone from the sheer unpredictability of life, and that sometimes the tiniest mistake can lead to the most unimaginable end.
The young millionaire, the Igbo tycoon who died tragically at a time he was to be celebrating his birthday.
Victor Nnamdi Okafor, better known as Ezego, or the King of Money, lived a life that many could only dream of, and yet his story ended in a way no one could have predicted. Born on December 25, 1964, into humble beginnings in Uzoakwa, Ahiala, in Anambra State, Nigeria, Ezego's childhood was fraught with hardship, family disputes, and controversy. From a young age, he displayed both resilience and audacity, but formal education was never his path. He dropped out of school early, and as a teenager, he allegedly became involved with local criminal activities, which eventually forced him to flee his hometown. What might have been a life of obscurity or misfortune, Ezego turned into opportunity. By 1989, he had relocated to Lagos with nothing but ambition and a vision to build wealth that would make him legendary. Ezego's rise was meteoric. Within a few short years, he transformed himself into one of Nigeria's wealthiest and most flamboyant businessmen. Starting with small trade ventures, he quickly mastered the art of networking and strategic partnerships. He expanded into electronics, real estate, and import-export businesses, leveraging every connection he could make to grow his empire. He built an empire of electronic stores, real estate ventures, and luxury properties, including over 70 houses across Nigeria and a N500 million mansion in Ihiala, with Italian imported marble and elaborate interiors that showcased his taste for extravagance. His car collection alone was worth nearly $1 billion naira, featuring Lincolns, Porsches, Mercedes convertibles, Lexus SUVs, and a fleet of other luxury vehicles paraded in grand convoys that left admirers and competitors alike stunned. He lived not just luxuriously but ostentatiously. His birthday celebrations were the stuff of legend, attended by celebrities and elites, often featuring live music, performances, and feasts that lasted for days. Ezego was not shy about showing his wealth. His mansions, businesses, and vehicles were symbols of power and status. Yet, behind the glamour and public celebrations, there was a recklessness that foreshadowed tragedy, a willingness to take risks that many would avoid, and a certain bravado that sometimes ignored the dangers around him. On his birthday, in 1999, Ezego did something unthinkable. For a man who had always relied on a personal chauffeur, he chose that day to drive himself. It was meant to be a simple drive, a personal touch to his birthday celebration as he traveled from Lagos to his hometown of Ihiala for his annual Christmas and birthday festivities. But fate intervened. While towing a broken-down vehicle on the Onitsha-Owerri road, the chain connecting the two cars snapped. The Lexus he was driving collided violently with the towed Cherokee, sending Ezego hurtling into a deep roadside ditch. Emergency responders rushed him to Our Lady of Lourdes Hospital in Ihiala, but the hospital was poorly equipped for a man with such severe injuries. Treatment was delayed, and despite desperate attempts to stabilize him, Ezego succumbed to internal bleeding, passing away the day after his 35th birthday. The irony was stark and almost poetic. The man who had amassed unimaginable wealth and lived a life of grandeur died performing a task he rarely ever undertook, driving himself. The news sent shockwaves across Nigeria. His empire, meticulously built over a decade, began to crumble almost immediately. Abandoned mansions, rusting luxury vehicles, and a community wary of the origins of his wealth became silent reminders of his sudden absence. Family disputes erupted over inheritance, leading to lengthy lawsuits. Even the lawyer entrusted with executing Ezego's will, Barnabas Igwe, was later murdered alongside his wife under mysterious circumstances, fueling speculation of foul play. Rumors swirled that some of his business associates had sought to capitalize on his untimely death, and his fortune became the center of intrigue, betrayal, and tragedy. Beyond the material loss, Ezego's story left a cultural imprint. In the communities where he had operated, stories of his larger-than-life persona mixed with cautionary tales of greed, ambition, and the perils of flashy wealth. His former properties, once symbols of his success, fell into disrepair. His iconic mansion in Ihiala was abandoned, and Ezego Crescent, a street that bore his name and reputation, became a ghostly relic of his life. Even decades later, his life continues to fascinate, with documentaries, articles, and public debates dissecting how such a meteoric rise could end so abruptly.
The billionaire banker who was seemingly murdered in his penthouse in Monaco, which is ironically considered the safest country for the wealthy.
Edmond Safra, one of the wealthiest and most influential bankers in the world, lived a life of power, privilege, and precision, but his end came in the most shocking and senseless way imaginable. Born in Beirut in 1932 to a family of Sephardic Jewish bankers, originally from Aleppo, Syria, Safra inherited a legacy of finance and ambition. By the time he was a teenager, he was already immersed in his father's banking business, learning the ins and outs of precious metals and foreign exchange. The family eventually moved to Italy, then Brazil, where Safra began shaping the empire that would make him a billionaire and a global financial force. By the 1980s, his banks had grown into multi-billion-dollar institutions, and his wealth extended across Geneva, New York, Monaco, and beyond. His clients were some of the richest and most powerful people on the planet, and his reputation for discretion, intelligence, and unmatched financial acumen was legendary. Safra was not only a financier, but a philanthropist of remarkable vision. He devoted vast sums of money to causes spanning education, medicine, and religion. He built and renovated synagogues in cities across the globe, saved historic Jewish sites from destruction, and supported hospitals from Sao Paulo to Tel Aviv. In New York, he endowed the Edmond J. Safra Synagogue, while in Israel, he contributed to the construction of the Edmond and Lily Safra Children's Hospital. His generosity extended to medical research, supporting Parkinson's studies, cancer research, and healthcare institutions worldwide. Even without a university education, he championed higher education, establishing scholarships, professorships, and research centers in some of the world's most prestigious institutions, ensuring that his legacy would influence future generations. Yet, despite all his accomplishments, his life ended in a way that no amount of money or influence could prevent. On December 3, 1999, at his luxurious penthouse in Monaco, a fire erupted that would take his life. The blaze was no accident. Investigators revealed that the fire had been deliberately set by one of his own security guards in a twisted attempt to stage a heroic rescue. The plan went horribly wrong, spiraling out of control and trapping Safra in the smoke-filled mansion. Despite the sophisticated security of his residence, Safra could not escape. He and his nurse, Vivian Torrente, were suffocated by the smoke. The man he trusted to protect him had become the architect of his death. The shock of Safra's death rippled across the world. Here was a man who had meticulously built his life around precision, control, and foresight, only to fall victim to a reckless and ill-conceived act of ambition from someone he trusted implicitly. The tragedy was compounded by his frail health. Safra had been battling Parkinson's disease and required nursing care, a vulnerability that made the fire even more deadly. News of his death stunned the financial world, and the circumstances surrounding it sent shivers down the spines of anyone who had ever considered themselves untouchable. Even in death, Safra's influence continued to be felt. Half of his immense fortune was directed to charitable causes, ensuring that his wealth would continue to impact lives around the world. His philanthropic initiatives, from education and healthcare to religious preservation and scientific research, remain living monuments to his vision and generosity. Yet, the image of a billionaire banker, suffocated in his own home by the very person he entrusted with his protection, remains one of the most chilling tales of wealth, trust, and human folly.
The great playwright died in New York City in 1983 under circumstances so strange that it took multiple examinations to figure out what happened.
Tennessee Williams, one of America's most celebrated playwrights, lived a life of brilliance, glamour, and quiet torment. Yet his end was as shocking as it was absurdly simple. Born Thomas Lanier Williams III in 1911 in Columbus, Mississippi, he grew up amid a household of contradictions. A deeply religious grandfather, a mother struggling with an unhappy marriage, and a father prone to violent temper and alcoholism. His early life was marked by frailty, illness, and confinement, which left him weak but observant, a young boy absorbing the intense emotions around him. These early hardships would seep into the fabric of his plays, giving voice to fragile characters, intense desires, and the loneliness of the human condition. Williams was haunted by the story of his sister Rose, who developed schizophrenia in her youth and endured a lobotomy that left her institutionalized for life. Devoted to her care, he provided her a share of his royalties, a gesture that revealed a generosity born of guilt, love, and family obligation. The shadow of Rose's fate loomed over him, shaping his fears of insanity and his fragile relationship with stability. Despite, or perhaps because of, these early struggles, he discovered writing as salvation. By the time he reached his 20s, he was producing stories, poems, and plays with feverish intensity, often working late into the night fueled by black coffee and cigarettes. His literary breakthrough came at age 33 with The Glass Menagerie, a play born from memory, loss, and longing. It was an instant sensation, capturing audiences with its raw humanity and fragile beauty. This success was swiftly followed by A Streetcar Named Desire, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, Sweet Bird of Youth, and The Night of the Iguana, securing his place among the greatest American dramatists. Critics lauded his work, and Broadway became the stage on which his genius unfolded. His plays, often adapted into films, earned him Pulitzer Prizes, Tony Awards, and international acclaim. But behind the triumphs lay a restless spirit, tormented by depression, addiction, and a fear of irrelevance. Williams's personal life was equally tumultuous. He navigated the complexities of love as a gay man in mid-20th century America, forming intense relationships that were often both passionate and destructive. His most enduring romance was with Frank Merlo, whose devotion brought Williams a rare period of stability and happiness. Merlot's death from lung cancer in 1963 plunged him into despair, exacerbating his dependency on alcohol and drugs and leading to years of mental and emotional instability. Despite these struggles, Williams continued to write, though many of his later works never achieved the acclaim of his earlier triumphs. By the early 1980s, Williams' life had settled into an uneasy rhythm of solitude, creative effort, and the lingering shadow of loss. He feared aging and losing his allure to younger men, and he was haunted by memories of failed relationships and the inexorable passage of time. And then, in 1983, the unthinkable happened. In a New York hotel room, Tennessee Williams, a man who had witnessed the extremes of human emotion, succumbed to a death both trivial and tragic. He choked on a plastic cap from a bottle of eye drop solution. Later reports clarified that he had been using it to ingest barbiturates, and that a toxic level of secobarbital had contributed to his demise. A man whose life was filled with drama, triumph, and deep emotional currents was undone by the simplest of accidents. In his will, Williams expressed a desire to be buried at sea, near the spot where the poet Hart Crane had met the same fate, a testament to his lifelong connection to art, death, and the sea. Yet, his brother arranged for him to be laid to rest in St. Louis, Missouri, alongside their mother. Most of his estate eventually went to the University of the South in Tennessee, ensuring that his legacy would continue to nurture creativity and literature for generations to come.